Why aren't we talking about Orbit Culture? They are one of those modern metal bands that seem to be on a lot of people's minds. They're not unknown by any means, and everybody who knows who they are loves them, or at least respects them. But for some reason, they haven't quite broken out yet. They're not an unknown band at all, but they don't seem to be as big as they should be or could be. And I don't understand. Now, since metal is technically outside of the mainstream for the most part, many metal bands, and especially ones that have a more extreme sound, have to build a reputation for a number of years and a number of albums before they get bigger. And Orbit Culture seems to be no exception to this rule of sorts. On the other hand, they really are an amazing modern metal band, and it kind of surprises me not more people talk about them. People that do know them all like them a lot, they have built a good reputation for themselves, and yet for some reason they still seem kind of underground. Like, they're not in the zeitgeist of metal as much as other really heavy bands that broke out in the past few years, like Lorna Shore or Slaughter to Prevail or Knocked Loose and those sorts of bands. Okay, I use the word underground, and that's not entirely correct of me to use that. They do have about 680,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. On YouTube, quite a few of their songs have a few million views, so clearly they're doing something right. It's just, why don't metalheads talk about them more? Now, just in case you're not too familiar with who Orbit Culture is, where they're from, and kind of music they make, let's dive a little bit into that, and maybe along the way we'll find out why they're not a bigger band. Yet. They formed in a small town in Sweden in 2013, at first as a bunch of friends wanting to make metal and hang out since their local scene was very small. Vocalist and guitarist Niklas Karlsson has always been the main songwriter of the band. By the end of the summer of 2013, they finished an EP called Odyssey. The main influences in their music come from melodic death metal and thrash metal, and they cite Gojira, Metallica, Lamb of God, and Static X as some of their main influences. Now, if you're wondering where their band name comes from, it doesn't really have much of a special meaning according to the band themselves. They had a bit of a hard time coming up with a good name, but sort of wanted the word culture in there. So they found a band name generator online and settled with Orbit Culture because they thought that sounded cool. In terms of band names, there's way sillier things out there for sure, okay? I mean, still, the most famous metal band ever is called Metallica, and we're all used to it. We don't think about this anymore, but it really is kind of a silly name, isn't it? Anyway, the EP Odyssey was met with a lot of positive feedback both nationally and internationally, and so the band started to work on their first full-length album, In Medias Res, which released on July 23rd of 2014. Slowly but surely building a following, they released their second album Raisin in 2016 with the music video for the single Son of All reaching 1 million views on YouTube. And Niklas has said that this was the moment he felt things started to get rolling for the band, and things have certainly not slowed down. The band released another EP titled Red Fog in 2018, and this is where Niklas says they really started to find their sound. The singles Saw, See Through Me, and Red Fog were all big successes, gaining over 1 million listens on multiple streaming platforms that year. In 2019, the band toured outside of Sweden for the first time with Rivers of Nihil. 2020 started off strong for the band with the release of the 3 singles Nensha, Rebirth, and The Shadowing, which all did well and got many old and new fans hyped. But it's 2020 and everybody's tour gets cancelled, but the release of the band's third album, Nija, did solidify their reputation as one of those great new and upcoming bands in the metal scene. Niklas described Nija as a fist on your skull that forces you to the ground and exhausts you to ask for more. If you ask me, that's a pretty perfect description of that album, and honestly of the band's overall sound and energy. They give you sledgehammer riffs and drums, Niklas's growls sound unreal, and his clean hooks always hit just right. They just sound huge, like a massive thunderstorm rolling in. In 2021, the band released another EP titled Shaman, and their fourth studio album titled Descent in 2023. Somehow on Descent, they do everything they did before, but with even tighter songwriting, even nastier riffs. But it has these ambient sounds and symphonic elements sprinkled in there that truly elevates the music to something that honestly should have gotten this band arena tours by now. But what can you do? Now, Descent and the following EP, The Forgotten, which featured a few tracks that didn't make it to the album and a brand new song, were the final albums released through Seek and Strike Records. And in December of 2023, the band signed with Century Media Records. So maybe being under a bigger label is what they need to go bigger places. Orbit Culture's fifth studio album, Death Above Life, released October 3rd, 2025, and I'm just gonna sneak a little bit of an album review in here because if this one doesn't convince the world that they are going to be remembered as one of the great death metal bands of the 21st century, then I don't know what will. And I did think for a little bit, are they going to get even heavier and darker on this album? Is it even possible? And they were like, don't worry about it, we got you. This album brings more breakneck riffs and ferociously addictive drums, and Niklas sounds as brutal and deeply melancholic as ever, but the album also takes a few twists and turns here and there, I feel like. The first song, Inferna, reminds you why this band is capturing metalheads everywhere. It's a pretty typical Orbit Culture song, but it does not sound stale in any kind of way. Now, Bloodhound comes at you at a bit of a different angle with a straight-up Slipknot type of influence in there. I wasn't sure how I felt about it at first, but it gets better every listen, and it's a type of song that makes this album interesting as well. I talked about sledgehammers before, but in terms of describing heavy music, we're gonna have to break out the industrial machinery metaphors because this song sounds like an army of jackhammers on steroids. Hold on to something. Now, Inside the Waves reminds us that melodically, this band absolutely knows how to make that work in their heavy sounds as well. And it's honestly very catchy, which is maybe something you don't really say about death metal a lot, but it is catchy and groovy and almost fun. Yeah, sure. Also, top tier guitar solo. Thank you, I loved it. Tales of War was the first single that came off of this album, and it sets the dark tone with some beautiful synths, but then turns around and smacks you in the face with modern thrash in a death metal coat. And then layers the melodies back in and gives you another stunning guitar solo, and it's huge, but emotional, but also relentless on how heavy it is. And I mean, we're used to that from Orbit Culture, but I'm not tired of it by any means. Hydra was another single, and for some reason it gives me Dune vibes. It's not just a music video. I mean, it's in the desert, and that's it, but okay. This song is easily one of the biggest sounding songs they've ever made. I say Dune because it reminds me of how Denis Villeneuve has such a knack for making things seem absolutely enormous on screen. Like, he does this in Dune, but also in his other movies, Blade Runner and Arrival. And I haven't seen all of his movies, but like, that's his thing, right? And this song makes me think of that massive feeling, except it's melodic death metal. Like, that main riff is something out of this world for sure. Like, this band sometimes makes me think they somehow came from the future, or deep space, or both. And they brought their music with them. Now, for me, this is one of the standout songs of this album for sure. Now, I feel like Nerve is the sort of fed-banger, mosh pit, circle pit song that probably gets everybody moving at a live show. It's, again, a pretty typical Orbit Culture song, but it never feels like they're repeating themselves. It's just good and massive and amazing, and another beautiful guitar solo, and I really love that. I really want more cool guitar solos in my modern metals, in general. Now, the title track, Death Above Life, is my absolute favorite song off this album, and easily one of the best songs they ever made. It's huge and dark and pummeling, and it gets under your skin, and that hypnotizing guitar hook just slams its claws into you, and the main riff drags you into the darkness for 5.5 minutes of pure death metal madness. It's an incredibly well-crafted song. This has been stuck in my head since I first heard it, and it cannot be easy to write something that is so massive but also clings to you emotionally like it does. It's just really, really good. I feel like The Storm takes another twist with how accessible it sounds. Like, if you want to introduce a friend who's not used to death metal, this is a good kind of sound for that. My first idea was it reminds me a lot of Amon Amarth, but of course in a very Orbit Culture kind of way, and honestly, it's a nice breather after how straight up depressing Death Above Life is. Now then, Neural Collapse dives straight back into the neck-wrecking riffs and drums and continues that typical enormous sound the band is getting better and better at with every release. I will say, not because I feel like I need to say something negative, but simply as a small footnote, I don't dislike it as such, but the heaviness in this song and some other moments on the album kind of cross a line in the production of sounding almost too distorted. I'm not sure if I'm describing it right, but I've heard with some newer songs from other bands as well, it kind of almost slides in too much territory. Like, heaviness to me comes from the songwriting and the riffs and the drums and just the music, right? It's not so much about how distorted it all is. It's just this thing that I've sort of noticed here and there, and I do love this modern era of metal, and maybe it's just my ears, or my earphones, or my headphones, or the compression of the platforms I choose to listen music to, which is mainly Spotify, so maybe it's them, I don't know. It's just a thought I had while I was listening to this. So anyway, the final song on the album, The Path I Walk, is essentially a bit of a ballad, which was unexpected, but I feel like it's a perfect way to end this album with. This band makes incredibly good, heavy, relentless songs, but when they decide to turn around, slow down, and make something melodic and emotional like this, they totally nail that as well, for my part. It's like, overall, a great album, and definitely a contender for Album of the Year, and I feel like it's another leap forward in the amazing evolution of Orbit Culture. Why is this band not as huge as they sound yet? It's hard to really pinpoint, I guess. I did say at the start of this video that maybe it's just this unwritten rule of many more extreme bands having to really slowly build their audience and reputation. Maybe being under a bigger record label will finally help launch this band out of the stratosphere, and maybe this is the album that at long last is going to land Orbit Culture among the stars of metal. Seriously, I've been reading a bunch of articles and reviews of the past years, and everybody keeps yelling about how it's a crying shame that they're not a huge band yet. And I did try to find a few reasons as to why that could be. And one article I read says that maybe it's because their sound is not trendy right now. So maybe they are doing things a bit ahead of their time, or maybe a bit too different from what people are used to. But I feel like I don't really agree with that. Orbit Culture takes influence from some of the biggest bands and sounds and styles in death metal that most metalheads don't dislike or disrespect. It's music, it's art, it's personal after all. So if you ask me, it really is just a matter of time before Orbit Culture becomes like a proper big metal band. Sooner rather than later, like many people have been saying for many years now. Yeah, either way, I like them a lot, and I hope they keep doing what they do, because it is very, very good. Okay, well, that is going to do it for me. Let me know in the comments if you have any ideas on why Orbit Culture's growth is what it is. Slowly but steady, but maybe a bit too slow. I also feel like so many people have been yelling about this that by the time I made this video, that it's just gonna seem like I'm just jumping on the bandwagon of like, Orbit Culture needs to be bigger. But either way, it is what it is. Now, I'm looking forward to seeing some other people's opinions. I will see you in the next video. In the meantime, stay kind and stay awesome, and I will see you soon. Bye.